Welcome to part 3 of this little demo. The first thing I need to do when I'm working on the foothills is to get the tone that I need. I'm looking for something slightly darker than the mountains, and you're going to see me check that here on the knife just to make sure I've got the right value. Then I've got the brush loaded appropriately to go ahead and drop the foothills in, and you see there I've checked it to make sure that the value is correct. And what I mean by correct is just that it looks right to me. You'll notice that I put it up there and then took a second to check it out from a few feet away just to make sure that it was indeed what I wanted, and it was. So what I'm doing is just working from the center there of that area to the edge and inward toward the center of the painting. I'll skip ahead quite a bit because this is an awful lot of tapping. I don't think there's any reason for you to watch me do the entire thing because it's all the same technique. It's worth noting here that I do have a very small amount of liquid white on the canvas there. I put it on prior to starting this, but there isn't much at all there. If you'll remember from the first video, I stopped about halfway down, about as far as the mountains went. And the only reason I did that is because I had to do this painting over the course of several days. And I didn't want to wet areas that I knew I wasn't going to be working on, so I just left them dry in the beginning. But before I went ahead and did this, I just coated that bottom area with a very, very, very thin amount of liquid white. More tapping. This is pretty much the story of Foothills. Here you see me change the value. I wanted to get that a little bit darker, so I just added a little bit more black to the mix and went for it. My thinking here is that as the landscape gets closer and closer to me, I'm going to make an effort to darken the values to make them appear as though they are coming forward in space. So the further away something is, the lighter the value is overall. Distance is portrayed by a lack of contrast, decreased saturation, and overall lighter values. And the reason for that is mostly because of atmospheric air particles, water, moisture, things like that in the air, depending on the climate and the environment. And then here, what I'm doing is just going through and adding some water, because again I have a lake in my Frozen Solitude painting. So this is where I decided it would be a good idea to go ahead and put the water in. Remember, I didn't have liquid white on the painting in the beginning because I knew I wasn't going to be able to get to it that day, and I needed to wait until the appropriate time to do it. So here I'm doing it. And I've got the white base coat under there that allows me to do this. So the idea here is to soften the bottom of the land mass there and essentially turn it into water reflections. And then the next step, of course, after this is to go ahead and put in the water lines. Oh, but wait, I'm adding another landmass. It's perfectly fine. Sometimes we change our minds like that, and it's okay. Why not? I think Bob's painting had 3 or 4 tiers. Off the top of my head, I can't exactly remember. But I'm basing my version loosely on Bob's, so I was more or less just doing what I felt looked good here. So yeah, I need another peninsula sticking out there to give myself a little bit more depth on this side. I don't think Bob's painting has trees over there either, but I went ahead and added some trees just because I felt like it. More tapping. And then of course, now that I have another landmass there, I have to soften the bottom. And that's what I'm doing here. Generally speaking, we want to go from the outside in, so from the edge of the canvas toward the center, and never the other way around. Because if you start in the middle and you sweep outward to the edge, there's a pretty good chance you'll put down a dark mark or something that you don't want there. Okay, so here we've got the knife and the softer white, the liquid white, on the knife, and I'm dropping in the water lines. The way I do it is pretty much exactly the way Bob did it, except that when I get to a certain point, I really enjoy getting in there and manipulating it and moving it around and getting it to look exactly the way I want it to look. You'll see me manipulate it from time to time, and when I'm doing that, it is with a completely dry knife. In other words, before I go to move it around, I always wipe the knife off. Now here you can see I've got the roll of paint on the underside because I'm about to pull it over to the right and down. And what that does is it creates a nice little waterline, shoreline effect. I like to be slow and meticulous when I do this because if you don't do it right, you can really make a mess. It's important to use a hairline of paint on the edge of that knife because if you use too much, it ends up just being a white glob, and that's not always what you want. Maybe sometimes you want that, but in my case, I can't think of a single time when I've ever wanted it to be gloppy, so yeah, you can see me here going back in there and manipulating that. And I think I actually did have paint on the underside of the knife that time. But here, I'm just pulling it around and trying to make it look more like water. I was teaching a class earlier today, actually, and my students asked me where to start from. And I think it's a pretty good thing to put into this video, so I'll just go ahead and point out that I started from the furthest point back there, and I'm working my way forward. I pretty much do that the same way every time. Start from the furthest away and work forward. Now, see here, I've put a little bit too much on the knife, and you can tell I did it because I immediately stopped, and I went ahead and wiped the knife off, and I'm just going to move it around. Now I've got plenty of white up there, plenty. So I'm just going to manipulate it and move it around and try to thin it out so that it doesn't look too, I don't know what's the word, overpowering maybe. We've got it fixed up. But again, I did that with a dry knife. If you put too much paint up there, the last thing you want to do is go up there with more paint, so just dry the knife off and move that stuff around. And working down and to the right. With the paint on the underside of the knife, it squeezes out on the left side and creates that nice little wave ripple-like effect. And with that, we're just about done with the water lines. A few more details to add and we'll move on. You see, I just like to break it up. I think it makes it look nice. Sometimes it's even nice to add a second row, just like that. The most important part about this is that you keep everything level. Keep the knife level, don't turn it, don't angle it, just keep it level. And work from side to side as you move around. And that's it. All right, that pretty much takes care of the foothills and the waterline. So we'll get a good look at this here, and then we'll move on to the next video. Thanks for watching.